Friends, we have a very special guest on this edition of the Elite Educator. It's Dr. Jamie Valenzuela-Mumau, who is on a journey to transform your classroom and empower your students. How can I say that? Well, he's been doing this for over 30 years and has a deep commitment to education. And he really believes in his students and empowering them. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Tell me a little bit about your journey.
Well, the way I like to tell the journey is I started education as a middle school bus driver. And so anybody knows that if you can handle middle schoolers on a bus, you can certainly work with them as they grow up. And from there, went into math education for middle school, and then served various positions in administration, leading to a superintendency at a charter school network, and ultimately an assistant superintendent for a county office of education here in California before I started my own company. And now we've got our own company, TJVM Corp, and excited about what we're doing to help our students with their futures.
So what do you do in this corporation as your own independent voice?
What we do is we really help learners identify what future career they can have based on their DNA behavioral strengths and their interests. Once we have that combination, we recommend up to five different kinds of jobs for them to consider that meet their behavioral strengths and their likes. And the idea is to get kids to be in the job, not just find a job, but to be committed to the job and have a job that really meets their needs in particular.
Well, that's important because you know that education either empowers students or destroys them along the way. And I think that's the biggest problem that happens with all this is that I think maybe 40 to 50% of students are treated, they do well in the school system. They are the honor. They go through it and just power it on. But how many don't get it, and how many don't really get empowered by it?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think that's reflective of our latest literacy results here in the United States. We're looking at a literacy rate of only a third of students, and I don't believe that's necessarily true of those who can read. I think it's indicative of just what school does to children. Remember back in the day when we were learning how to do math? Did you ever have that teacher that just really didn't help someone understand why math works?
Oh, of course. You know, I did that with calculus. Somehow I got through calculus, but I never really understood calculus. It was one of those things you memorize and got through the facts. But boy, to truly understand it was beyond me.
Exactly. And it takes a special teacher to meet students right where they're at, to give them the opportunity to take the lead in order for them to be successful. And that's what we're doing with TJVM Corp, doing business as Coherent Educational Solutions with My Future Capacity, is we're putting learners in the driver's seat for their own career, whether that be a professional career requiring a degree, a career that you need to go to trade school for, or entrepreneurship, or even the military route. We really support learners in what they want to be when they grow up for jobs we don't even know yet.
You know, that's important. And to get kids motivated to do that is really important. But it's not, you know, education is not just theory, but it's day-to-day reality in the classroom, is it not?
Well, yes, and I might invite us to consider that education is 24/7. Whether it's inside of a classroom, inside of your house, outdoors, wherever you exist, learning can happen and take place. And I think that we have to realize that we have to empower people to understand that they can learn at any given time, any given moment.
Yeah. And, you know, I think the problem now is there's a lot of distractions. You know, there's these cell phones, there's these other things that keep people away from really learning. They keep the brain amused and playing, but they don't necessarily get that brain learning properly.
Yeah, I hear you, and I agree with you because they certainly can be. Technology can be distracting. However, when technology is used in a way that empowers learners, then the distraction becomes the attraction, if that makes any sense. And so we leverage the use of technology and AI to guide learners on their pathway towards their future career. And we do this at the same time promoting a social network within our system called My Future Capacity that really engages the learners in this process.
Why don't you tell us more about that? Why don't you inform our listeners about what you're talking about?
Absolutely. And so once we get the results in My Future Capacity, this platform on the web and soon to be downloadable application, they can take charge of their own career search along with taking classes around self mastery. So we have an integrated curriculum where learners are able to earn tokens and earn points for them to progress along the route of self mastery, which we know includes self regulation, self worth, these kinds of things that we don't teach in school outright. They're kind of learned along the way. So we give them access to that as well as their own search. And then as they go through the process, we utilize artificial intelligence to help them understand about the job that they're seeking, that they may like, live a day in the life of this particular position. Also to check in with them on their academics and check in with them on their well-being to ensure that they're feeling supported because in high schools today, counselors to student ratio is 1 to 500. So we have to utilize and leverage technology to help our learners out. We call this whole eduverse My Future Capacity, and it's a place where you can go as a K-12 learner, and you can find that career. You can also go as an adult. As an adult, if you want to retool, if you want to reskill, you can come to My Future Capacity, and you can find those positions as well, and you can find the skills needed, and you can actually take courses to attain those skills. As a matter of fact, we have an agreement with one of our universities here in California where if you pass a micro credential through My Future Capacity, you can apply for college units. And so that's exciting that we have that support, and we're looking for other colleges and universities to join the fun and help provide that so that students have a choice of where they can get those credits.
Okay. Now, from your extensive career, can you share a moment from your journey where you saw a classroom or school community completely change because of equity-focused practices?
I absolutely can. And this happened in Monterey County, California. Monterey County is the home of the most learners of English, because in Monterey County, we attract the immigrant to work in the fields. We're the salad bowl of the United States, and so what I saw was incredible in Soledad, in their school district, where the English language teacher, the ELD teacher, she was working with her students, and instead of teaching language as you and I might have thought with a book and repeated lessons and vocabulary. She actually had the learners investigate something they were interested in their native language, and then she found ways to connect the English language to that. It was just beautiful because I've never seen so many learners of English excited about learning English because it was subject matter that they were interested in. It led to them closing the English language learning high school graduation gap, which was amazing because typically English language learners in Soledad, California, had to attend high school for a fifth year to graduate. And so it really transformed those students' lives, and it was amazing to see.
Well, that's very important. Transforming lives. Now, how do you guide schools in balancing academic rigor with the need for cultural responsive, emotionally supportive environments?
That's a great question, and the only way in my career that I've figured out how to do that is to lean on the learner, is to understand where that learner is coming from, and to weave in the academic piece to that learner's particular context as best we can. I have to say that not everything that we teach is the most important thing. What we need to do is we need to help people become lovers of learning. And they only do that when we lean upon them and their culture and then identify connections to the academics, if that makes sense.
Can you go into that in a little bit more depth so everybody can understand that?
Yeah, sure. So if I'm a learner that comes from a Latino, primarily Latino population. Say my family is from Mexico, and there's a deep rooted culture that we have that family is the most important thing in our culture, and that regardless of what comes our way, we're always going to lean on our family for advice and for well-being and the such. As a teacher, I have to understand that that is the most important part of their particular culture. So I have to find ways to bring the family into the classroom. And so when I think of ways to engage kids, I think of, okay, here's this content that I want the learners to have. How can they apply that and use that in their familial situation? And how can they leverage what they love about their family being important and tie it to this academic concept? Take a simple concept like learning math. How can I make math applicable to the family? Well, one way in a younger elementary classroom might be, let's talk about your birthday party. Let's plan your birthday party. You know that you're going to have your family and your cousins and your friends come over. How many people are going to be at your party? Now, how much pizza are you going to need if one pizza feeds 6 people? And so you simply just make those connections, which then brings the context, their culture into the classroom. Now, that's a simplified example. It gets more difficult as people get a little older, right? As students grow. But this is where the empowered learner comes into play, because they can take and help you make those connections if we build those relationships with kids. And really, at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's about relationships. It's about building those relationships.
And that's how you make teaching fun,
Yeah.
because it's not that way. It's not something that's rote. Many kids hate math. And the reason they hate math is because it's not fun and doesn't apply to them.
Yeah, that's true. And what we also need to realize, I think, in education is how do we leverage the technology to help with some of the skill in math to reduce the effective filter and yet still teach what math is meant to do, which is teach problem solving, resilience, thinking critically and logically. Some of those soft skills that the World Economic Forum talk about that's going to be needed in the future jobs that we don't even know exist yet. And so how might we approach it just a little differently than the rote memorization that we've done for the 30 years I've been in the business?
Yeah, that's important. And I see where you're coming from. So what role do student voices play in shaping the changes you implement with educators and schools?
You know, it's different based on where you're at in the country or in the world. It's different to say because some I need to think about this for a minute. Some people give the student a voice, and some people don't. Some people don't give a student the voice, and they. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not very popular to do that. In order to affect policy, at the end of the day, you need an open-minded school board. Number one, you need an open-minded leadership department. Your cabinet, your superintendent, your assistant sup of educational services need to be able to understand that role that students can play, because when they do, the effect on their own growth is tremendous. I believe that this is part of what KIP does in the charter school network. I'm not sure if you've heard of KIP or not, but
Why don't you share that for those who haven't heard about it?
yeah, KIP is a charter school. Knowledge is power is what KIP stands for. And what they do is they put the learner at the center and listen to their voice and provide an atmosphere where they take the lead in learning the content that needs to be learned. Now, that doesn't mean that the students are writing the daily lesson plans. It just means that learners have choice and voice. And when you have choice and voice and you're held to a high standard, you get intrinsic motivation activated within your learner. And so once that intrinsic motivation is activated, the sky's the limit for that learner. Think about a time when you were intrinsically motivated to do something. Weren't you more excited about getting it done than the person next to you? Of course you were. And you were empowered by the person who gave that gift to you rather than being the person receiving the information from the adult. And that's what it's about. And if we could find ways like KIP has to make this in policy, I strongly believe that we'll see different outcomes on our progress reports and national report cards.
I think that's true. Making kids intrinsically motivated to love the things is far better than having some sort of extrinsic thing like marks, etc.
Yeah, that's true. And, a lot of people think that we still continue to have that need because of the video games that are being played and the tokens that they get or the stripes that they receive or whatever the case may be. But I'll tell you, what I believe happens when learners are playing those video games is that there's voice and choice. It's not about the external. It's about the fact they can control how that story plays out for them in whatever video game they're playing, if that makes any sense. And so I think that's what we need to take away from the video games, not this extrinsic motivation piece.
Those are good statements you're making there. So if there's one thing in education today that you could ban forever, what would it be?
Wow. That's a really good question. If I could ban something forever, it would be the teacher being the sage on the stage. We want the teacher to be the guide on the side. And we want to produce teachers who facilitate learning rather than being the center of all knowledge. Years ago, when I first started teaching, it was much like that. Teachers had the freedom to be able to create an environment like we're talking about. Due to state testing and due to federal requirements, and due to the fact that one of our presidents said that every child will go to college, we shifted to this kind of black and white, you got it or you don't got it, I'm the all-knowing center of attention in the classroom. And I think we're finding out it doesn't work. If there's something that our current leadership in the United States is doing that I think is great, that's decentralizing with the U.S. DOE not being the center of it and giving that control back to the local. I think that could actually enhance what we're talking about here if we do it right and take advantage of the opportunity.
So what trends or shifts in education give you the most hope for building truly equitable and transformative learning environments?
I think the shift into competency-based assessing. I think that if we can fully make the shift to understand how a learner approaches problem solving, and if the learner does a particular assessment and it doesn't turn out the way the learner expected, to get into the learner's mind to think, to see what is it that they would have done differently. I think that's key because that's real life. Very seldom do you have a one and done. You either got it or you don't got it chance. Many times you get to reflect, you get to refine, and you get to redo. And so I think that the more we allow this kind of assessment to take place and to really see the competency of learners, I think that that's going to really change how the outcomes show.
So can you tell our listeners a little bit more about what you have to offer in this day and age?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have our My Future Capacity Eduverse, as I like to call it. That's our primary. We made that shift right after COVID to become an ed tech company. We also offer consulting services, and we offer services to help teachers create atmospheres like we're discussing in terms of student-centered. We offer consulting and administration and helping them create a school environment to the like. And primarily, we are working with organizations to identify ways to leverage the technology that we have to assist the learner in their own education by keeping them in the center. And so it's hard to nail us down on exactly what it is that we do, but we certainly can consult and meet you right where you're at and help you make those changes that you see fit.
It has been indeed a pleasure to have you, Jamie. How can people get in touch with you if they'd like to know more?
Absolutely. They can certainly reach out to our email, jamie@coherented.com, or they can go to our website at coherented.com. Those are two ways they can reach out, and I'm happy to assist them, and I will respond to every email that I get within 24 hours.
Jamie, thank you again for spending this time with us, and thank you again for educating our listeners out there.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, bye for now.